Hello children, I'm Victoria Carlton and I'm going to read you one of my favourite Bible stories. This Bible story is all about Rebecca and Isaac, and I'm taking it from the Lectionary Story Bible by Ralph Milton for Year A, and it's based on chapter 24 from the book of Genesis from the Bible. Sarah was 127 years old when she died. That's very old, isn't it? Isaac was a grown-up man by this time. He cried when his mum died. Isaac and his father Abraham buried her in a special place which they bought from some of the people who lived nearby. Before Sarah died, she and Isaac and Abraham had some long talks about God's promise. Now Isaac remembered those talks with his mum, and he felt very lonely. Isaac said, Abraham, you need to get married. But Dad, Isaac started to say, never mind, do what I say. You can't marry any of the women around here, Abraham said. They don't live in God's way. They don't understand about God's promise. But Dad, Isaac said again, just be quiet and listen, said Abraham. I'll send one of my servants to the place where we used to live long before you were born, Isaac. We have lots of uncles and aunts and cousins living there. They don't know about God's promise, but they do try to live in God's way. Maybe the servant can find the right person for you to marry. So Abraham sent one of his servants, a man named Eliezer, to a town called Nahor, where Abraham's relatives still lived. He made Eliezer promise to find just the right woman for his son. To help the servant, Abraham sent along 10 camels loaded down with good things. These were gifts that could be given to Abraham's relatives. They were camels that sort of looked a little bit like this. Okay. When Eliezer got to Nahor, he was hot and tired, so he stopped to rest under a shady tree that grew near a well. While he was resting, he watched the people coming down to the well to get water. And if you look behind me, you can actually see a well, and you can see a lady, and she is coming down to get some water from the well as well. The servant prayed to God, please help me find the right person. Just then he saw Rebecca coming to the well. Now, if you look at this lady, all right, I'm just going to get out of the way so you can actually see her. That lady looks really pretty, doesn't she? And she's a little bit like the lady Rebecca that Eliezer was actually looking at. The servant prayed to God, please help me choose the right person to be Isaac's wife. And he was watching Rebecca and he thought, wow, she looks like a really nice person. Could you get me a drink? He said to Rebecca. Of course, she said. And then, without being asked, she gave water to all of the 10 camels too. And they were very happy to get that water, very happy, because they'd come a long way and they'd been bringing a lot of gifts. That was hard work because camels drink lots and lots of water. The well was very deep. She was quite tired by the time she finished, but she didn't mind. Rebecca felt it was important to be kind to strangers. She often offered to help people when they seemed to need it. She was a kind, helpful person. The servant smiled as he watched her giving water to the camels. I think that this might be the woman that God would like me to bring to Isaac so that they can share the promise together. Thank you, said Abraham's servant when Rebecca had finished. Is there room at your house for me to spend the night? Of course, said Rebecca. We've got lots of room and food for you and also for your camels. There was lots to talk about at Rebecca's house that night. They invited Eliezer to have supper with them. Before he would eat, he had to tell them all the news about Abraham and Sarah and Isaac. And of course, he explained why he had come. I think God wants me to invite Rebecca to come to marry Isaac, Eliza said. Rebecca's mum and her brother and all the rest of the family didn't know what to think. They talked about whether Rebecca should or shouldn't go. Nobody said, let's go ask Rebecca. Finally, they all agreed Rebecca should go. That's when Eliza brought out all the wonderful gifts he had bought. He gave them all to Rebecca's family. They all talked as if it didn't matter what Rebecca thought. The next day, someone said, maybe we should ask Rebecca. I think they should have asked Rebecca, don't you, children? Right now, said her mother, would you like to go with this man to marry his master? Yes, Rebecca said. I would like to actually go right now. I don't even want to wait a week. The servant smiled to himself. She can think for herself, he thought. She's not only got a strong body, she's got a strong spirit too. Rebecca and Isaac will like each other. The next morning, they all left. The servant and his helpers and all 10 camels and Rebecca and her helpers. There were lots of hugs and tears and goodbyes. And they all set off. It took many days to get to where Isaac lived in Canaan. Rebecca didn't like riding on camels one bit. Sometimes she felt sick because the camels would sway back and forth and back and forth. Once she had to stop and throw up, she was so sick. Sometimes she hated the smell of the camels. Sometimes she was just bored. It was a long trip. One day, Eliza told her, we're getting close to Canaan now. Rebecca began to get very excited. When she saw a man walking in the field, she asked Eliza, who's that? That, said Eliza, is Isaac. He's the man that you have come to marry. Make the camel kneel so I can get off, please, said Rebecca. Then she began to walk across the field towards Isaac. Isaac saw Rebecca coming across the field. They had never seen each other before, and yet they just knew that they were going to be husband and wife. Both Rebecca and Isaac had thought of things that they would say to each other when they met. Now neither of them could think of anything. They walked together towards the tent where Sarah, Isaac's mother, had lived. Rebecca and Isaac were married in that tent. In time, they came to love each other very deeply. And Rebecca often thanked God because of the promise that she and Isaac shared. Isn't that a beautiful story? It's always a beautiful story when somebody meets somebody and they fall in love and they get married. Thank you very much for listening to my story.